Thanks again for inviting me to speak. I always enjoy working with you, as I just said a few minutes ago. I'm happy to be here today to speak with you all about disability etiquette and awareness. Some of what we're going to talk about today is probably familiar to you. Some of it will be new, and some of it might just seem kind of like a no-brainer, but I do suspect that some of it will be new. I'm actually going to turn my camera off now so that we can kind of focus on the slides and the content. Super. All right, well, let's get going. So again, I am Jeminie Shell, and I'm with the New Mexico Governor's Commission on Disability. We are a state advisory agency, and we provide services such as technical assistance, training, and advocacy for individuals or groups who are facing barriers. We assist state and local governments, employers and businesses, nonprofits, higher education, and the general public. So we really advise everyone. Since we're talking about the courts, I want to just speak briefly about who are court users and who you might be running into. Of course, we've got litigants, defendants, jurors, witnesses, attorneys, other practitioners, researchers, court spectators, advocates, parents and children and juveniles, married couples and divorcees, volunteers, media, general public, and who else might be there? Lots of options. I'm sure you see just a whole slew of different people, but this list isn't meant to just kind of bring attention to the fact that you are going to see any number of people in any number of roles, and they might have a disability that you might end up having to interact with. So we just want to bring that forward. There we go. And again, because we're talking about the courts, I want to bring this up. I want to give Julie Ballinger a shout out, because this is actually her slide that I borrowed from her. She's done a lot of work and a lot of trainings for the court system and has worked with Peggy a lot recently. So you may have even seen this slide before, but I'm going to go over it here because it's really important to realize that the number of people that you deal with every day with disabilities is actually quite high, higher than the general public. So it's estimated that 32% of state and federal inmates have a disability. That means over 750,000 people with disabilities are incarcerated across the country. And then inmates with psychiatric disabilities exceed the number in state psychiatric hospitals tenfold, and tens of thousands of deaf people are currently incarcerated. It's estimated that 46% of inmates have a traumatic brain injury, and that is compared to only 8.5% of people in the general population. That's a huge discrepancy. So you're very likely to be interacting with people with traumatic brain injury, and it's not always an easy task. About 85, the Bureau of Justice Statistics report has noted that 40% of local jail inmates report having at least one disability. Many of them have more than one. And then about 85% of incarcerated youth have a disability. These youth often have undiagnosed disabilities, and they are a unique and particularly vulnerable group in juvenile facilities. It's important to note that they are referred to the juvenile justice system earlier than youth without disabilities, and they are referred for more serious crimes and experience shorter survival times before they recidivate. And then finally, the systematic discrimination by state courts, along with child welfare agencies against parents with disabilities and their families, has really taken a toll on those families. Statistics indicate that children of parents with disabilities are removed from their parents at a higher rate than parents who are not disabled. So you can see that because of the high numbers of people that you see in the courts every day who have disabilities, it's really important to know a bit about them and how to interact with them respectfully. So we're going to start talking about disability and awareness and etiquette now. The ADA defines disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. It actually includes people who have a record of such an impairment, even if they do not currently have a disability. This could be someone whose cancer is in remission, for instance. It includes individuals who do not have a disability but are regarded as having a disability. An example of this might be a man who's rumored to have HIV but in fact does not have it. And then it's also unlawful to discriminate against a person based on that person's association with a person with a disability. Now, this could be a friend or family member of a person with HIV, for instance. What's the difference between a disability and a handicap? It's a lot of people just talk about handicap as a person is handicapped, but there's actually a difference, and it's not quite accurate. A disability is a condition that's caused by accident, trauma, genetics, or disease. It may limit a person's mobility, hearing, vision, speech, cognitive function, emotional function, and other bodily functions. We're going to look at a list of different types of disabilities in just a minute. It can be permanent or temporary, and it can be visible or invisible. On the other hand, a handicap is a physical or attitudinal constraint that is imposed upon a person. And that might be something like a building that cannot be accessed by a wheelchair. That's a handicap. Now, there are lots of different types of disabilities under that definition of disability by the ADA. Here's a partial list: deafness or hard of hearing, blindness or low vision, dyslexia and other specific learning disabilities, cognitive developmental disabilities, psychiatric disabilities such as PTSD, bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia, partially or completely missing limbs, also mobility impairments, autism, cancer, cerebral palsy, diabetes, epilepsy, substance use disorder. You see that in the courts a lot, I'm sure. That's something that you want to pay attention to. That is a disability if they are in remission. If they're active users, then it's not considered a disability under the ADA. But if they are in remission and in treatment, then it's considered a disability. So keep that in mind. That's a little bit different from some of the others. And then we've got hypertension, digestive disorders, long COVID is a disability. Gender dysphoria has been identified as a disability recently, and then also TBI, or traumatic brain injury. So I just want to point out that everyone with a disability is an individual, and having a disability means different things to different people, and each person experiences their disability differently. It's really important to understand that having a disability is just one part of a person's identity. You might identify them as having a disability, and that might be the first thing you think about them, but they have their own identity, and they might identify themselves differently from how you do. And that's where we get into the different types of language that disabled people might use to define themselves or identify themselves. First is people first language. For example, the term people with a disability. You don't want to use terms such as the disabled or the handicapped. Avoid referring to people by their disability first, in other words. So don't say blind man, say man who is blind. Most might say I'm a person with a disability, man who is blind, again. And then avoid referring to people by their disability. She is an epileptic. Instead of that, say she has epilepsy. Don't say wheelchair bound. Most wheelchair users perceive their wheelchair as liberating, not confining. So instead, say she uses a wheelchair. And then rather than saying special needs, it should simply be services for students with disabilities. And then there is actually an exception to this rule. That is how you should, what you should defer to is person first. But there are some people in the disability community who like to identify themselves in this identity first way. And that might mean they refer to themselves as a deaf person or a blind man or a disabled person. You should always respect the individual's preference. You should default to person first language unless you're asked to change it to identity first. And then do not refer to people without disabilities as normal. That's a really big key. You want to say a person without a disability instead. And we have an image here that says, what is normal? And normal is upside down. It's because normal is, who knows what normal is? We don't necessarily have a good feel for what that is. We don't have a definition. It's just something that you really shouldn't say. Now we're going to talk about something that maybe you haven't heard about, and that's ableism. Ableism is a type of discrimination in which able-bodied individuals are viewed as normal and superior to those with a disability, and that it results in prejudice toward the people with a disability. Ableism is ingrained discrimination. It's bias based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, intelligence, and excellence. It means, and it makes an entire group less than, and typical abilities are superior. So people with disabilities are seen as inferior. It's social prejudice, marginalization, and isolation. It presents systemically, culturally, and interpersonally. So it really permeates everything that a person with a disability experiences. So ableism is also based on the belief that typical abilities are superior. I said that in kind of a different way a minute ago. It views people with disabilities as incomplete or diminished or damaged in some way. It holds the assumption that people with disabilities require fixing, such as expecting a person who is deaf to get a cochlear implant because you assume that they want to be a hearing person. That's not necessarily true of all people who are deaf or hard of hearing. It measures quality of life with a disability against a non-disabled standard. It defines people by their disabilities, and it includes harmful stereotypes, misconceptions, and generalizations. And it actually can be either intentional or unintentional. Some people just believe what they believe, and they have an opinion, and they might continue to carry that opinion even if they've been corrected. So that can be an intentional situation. So, and then we have ableism in action. We see ableism in language. There's a history of dehumanizing and othering language that reflects cultural mores that marginalize and trivialize disabled individuals and communities. There's a factor of isolation, separation of disabled people from abled people in systems and spaces, and the prioritization of invisibility. The society wants the people with disabilities to be invisible. They don't want to have to, quote unquote, deal with them. Invisibility is also an issue. Stereotypical and limited representation of people with disabilities in the media. Very, very limited. And then there's violence actually around ableism. There are exercises of power and control. This can range from physical violence, such as eugenic sterilization, which is still going on, to economic violence, such as SSI restrictions on employment. People are unable to make a living because of these barriers. So what else does it look like? There, again, is an emphasis on a cure or fixing or finding a path to quote unquote normalcy. There's infantilization and lack of autonomy in decision-making. There is a disregard for social, cultural, and community factors. There's also an environmental and structural barrier factor. Media portrayals of disability often result in inspiration porn, and we're going to watch a video about that in just a second. You might not have heard of that phrase before, but it's very common in the disability community. And then there are systemic barriers to spaces, experiences, and inclusion for people with disabilities. This is all falls under ableism. There was a little bit of duplication in some of these slides, but it's because I wanted to reinforce these ideas, because it's critical to understand how ableism works and how it shows up in society and how it shows up in a disabled person's life. So now we're going to talk about inspiration porn. This is Stella Young. She's a comedian and activist, and this is a presentation that she did for TED Talks on "I'm Not Your Inspiration, Thank You Very Much." So this is about a 9-minute video, so it's a little bit long, but this is really important stuff, and it's coming directly from the person with a disability who experiences this every day.
I grew up in a very small country town in Victoria. I had a very normal, low-key kind of upbringing. I went to school, I hung out with my friends, I fought with my younger sisters. It was all very normal. And when I was 15, a member of my local community approached my parents and wanted to nominate me for a Community Achievement Award. And my parents said, that's really nice, but there's kind of one glaring problem with that. She hasn't actually achieved anything. Yeah, and they were right. I went to school, I got good marks, I had a very low-key after-school job in my mum's hairdressing salon, and I spent a lot of time watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Dawson's Creek. Yeah, I know, what a contradiction. But they were right. I wasn't doing anything that was out of the ordinary at all. I wasn't doing anything that could be considered an achievement if you took disability out of the equation. Years later, I was on my second teaching round in a Melbourne high school, and I was about 20 minutes into a Year 11 legal studies class when this boy put up his hand and said, "Hey, miss, when are you going to start doing your speech?" And I said, "What speech?" I'd been talking to them about defamation law for a good 20 minutes. And he said, like your motivational speaking. When people in wheelchairs come to school, they usually say, like, inspirational stuff. Yeah. It's usually in the big hall. And that's when it dawned on me. This kid had only ever experienced disabled people as objects of inspiration. We are not, to this kid, and it's not his fault. I mean, that's true for many of us. For lots of us, disabled people are not our teachers or our doctors or our manicurists. We're not real people. We are there to inspire. And in fact, I'm sitting on this stage looking like I do in this wheelchair, and you are probably kind of expecting me to inspire you, right? Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you dramatically. I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here to tell you that we have been lied to about disability. Yeah, we've been sold the lie that disability is a bad thing. Capital B, capital T. It's a bad thing. And to live with disability makes you exceptional. It's not a bad thing, and it doesn't make you exceptional. And in the past few years, we've been able to propagate this lie even further via social media. You may have seen images like this one. The only disability in life is a bad attitude. Or this one. Your excuse is invalid, indeed. Or this one. Before you quit, try. Yeah. These are just a couple of examples, but there are a lot of these images out there. You might have seen the one, the little girl with no hands, drawing a picture with a pencil held in her mouth. You might have seen a child running on carbon fibre prosthetic legs. And these images, there are lots of them out there. They are what we call inspiration porn. And I use the term porn deliberately because they objectify one group of people for the benefit of another group of people. So in this case, we're objectifying disabled people for the benefit of non-disabled people. The purpose of these images is to inspire you, to motivate you, so that we can look at them and think, well, however bad my life is, it could be worse. I could be that person. But what if you are that person? I've lost count of the number of times that I've been approached by strangers wanting to tell me that they think I'm brave or inspirational. And this was long before my work had any kind of public profile. They were just kind of congratulating me for managing to get up in the morning and remember my own name. And it is objectifying. These images objectify disabled people for the benefit of non-disabled people. You know, they are there so that you can look at them and think that things aren't so bad for you, to put your worries into perspective. And life as a disabled person is actually somewhat difficult. We do overcome some things, but the things that we're overcoming are not the things that you think they are. They are not things to do with our bodies. I use the term disabled people quite deliberately because I subscribe to what's called the social model of disability, which tells us that we are more disabled by our bodies, the society that we live in rather, than by our bodies and our diagnoses. So I've lived in this body a long time. I'm quite fond of it. It does the things that I need it to do, and I've learnt to use it to the best of its capacity, just as you have. And that's the thing about those kids in those pictures as well. They're not doing anything out of the ordinary. They are just using their bodies to the best of their capacity. So is it really fair to objectify them in the way that we do, to share those images? People, when they say, you know, you're an inspiration, they mean it as a compliment. They mean it as a compliment. And I know why it happens. It's because of the lie. It's because we've been sold this lie that disability makes you exceptional. And it honestly doesn't. And I know what you're thinking. You know, I'm up here bagging out inspiration. And you're thinking, geez, Stella, aren't you inspired sometimes by some things? And the thing is, I am. I learn from other disabled people all the time. I'm learning not that I am luckier than them, though. I am learning that it's a genius idea to use a pair of barbecue tongs to pick up things that you drop. I'm learning that nifty trick where you can charge your mobile phone battery from your chair battery. Genius. We are learning from each other strength and endurance, not against our bodies and our diagnoses, but against a world that exceptionalises and objectifies us. I really think that this lie that we've been sold about disability is the greatest injustice. It makes life hard for us. And that quote, "the only disability in life is a bad attitude," the reason that that's bullshit is because it's just not true. Because of the social model of disability, you know, no amount of smiling at a flight of stairs has ever made it turn into a rap. Never. You know, smiling at a television screen isn't going to make closed captions appear for people who are deaf. You know, no amount of standing in the middle of a bookshop and radiating a positive attitude is going to turn all those books into Braille. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I really want to live in a world where disability is not the exception but the norm. I want to live in a world where a 15-year-old girl sitting in her bedroom watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer isn't referred to as achieving anything because she's doing it sitting down. I want to live in a world where we don't have such low expectations of disabled people that we are congratulated for getting out of bed and remembering our own names in the morning. I want to live in a world where we value genuine achievement for disabled people. And I want to live in a world where a kid in year 11 in a Melbourne high school is not one bit surprised that his new teacher is a wheelchair user. Disability doesn't make you exceptional, but questioning what you think you know about it does. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I keep coughing. I hope you enjoyed that. That's one of my very favorite videos about disability. I will show you one more in just a little bit. Oops, there we go. Okay, so on with ableist language and alternatives, or on to the ableist language and alternatives. So we talked a little bit earlier about what to say and not to say, but this is going to be a little bit more comprehensive list. So don't say the disabled, instead say people with disabilities. Instead of able-bodied or normal, instead say people without disabilities. Instead of wheelchair bound or confined to a wheelchair, say a wheelchair user or a person who uses a wheelchair. Instead of the handicapped or crippled, say person with a disability. Instead of handicap parking or handicap bathroom, say accessible parking and accessible bathroom. Handicapped is really not an appropriate word to use in any context anymore. Instead of mentally retarded or slow or special, say person with a developmental disability, or you can say person with an intellectual disability. There's more. Instead of OCD, say fastidious, meticulous, or hyper-focused. Instead of lame, say pointless or disappointing. Instead of suffers from or a victim of XYZ, then instead say person who has XYZ. Instead of midget or dwarf, say person of short stature. Instead of brain damaged, say person with a TBI, traumatic brain injury, or an acquired brain injury is another way of putting that. Instead of crazy or insane or psycho, say wild, unbelievable, or unpredictable. And instead of idiotic, moronic, or dumb, say illogical, ridiculous, or irrational. Do we have any questions? I thought have come to kind of a transition spot.
I don't see any questions right now, Jeminie.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so for disability etiquette, these are some really core basic rules that need to be followed if you're going to be interacting respectfully with someone with a disability, with a whole range of different disabilities. First of all, don't make assumptions. Always ask before helping. Don't assume that they can't do something. Don't over assist. We're going to look at a video that shows a little negative outcome of over assisting somebody in just a minute. Respect individuality and autonomy. Talk to the person directly, not the companion or the interpreter. That's something that we see a lot, and I'm sure Megan has seen this a million times. Somebody talking to someone who's deaf or hard of hearing, and the interpreter is there interpreting, and instead of talking to the person who's deaf, the person talks to the interpreter instead, and that's not okay. Never do that. Always talk directly to the person who's deaf. Let's see, make eye contact and speak at a normal volume. Don't raise your voice for someone who's deaf unless you are absolutely sure that that helps them hear you. Don't do that. They might tell you that you can raise your voice a little bit and they can hear you better, but don't do it at the outset. And then allow time for mutual understanding. This is a big one in the courts. Be patient, listen, don't interrupt, follow their lead. Schedule extra time when necessary. So if you're talking to somebody who has an intellectual disability, a developmental disability, autism, things like this, they're not going to necessarily follow what's going on very easily, and it takes time to communicate with them. And one of the things under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act that the court must ensure is effective communication. So this is one example here of where you would need to potentially schedule extra time when talking to certain people with certain types of disabilities in order to ensure effective communication. That's a big one. Same thing with people who are deaf, and you might have to schedule extra time because sometimes the interpretation process can take a little bit more time than just a regular conversation with someone who's not deaf. Do treat adults as adults, use age-appropriate language and tone, and do not touch them or their equipment without permission. That's also a big one. A lot of people infantilize people who have disabilities and will touch their wheelchair, for instance, without being given permission first. Don't do that. Again, don't make assumptions, respect individuality and autonomy, allow time for mutual understanding, and treat adults as adults. And then if you aren't sure, please ask. They want to have a good experience in interacting with you, and you want to have a good experience interacting with them. So just ask them what it is that you can do to have a better experience. So here are some general communication pointers for people with disabilities. This is especially true for either people maybe who are deaf, people with cognitive or intellectual disabilities, people with autism in addition. You want to make sure that if you don't understand what's being said, you ask the person to repeat themselves. There are general speech disabilities where sometimes it's hard to understand someone. Make sure that you ask one question at a time and give the person time to respond before moving on. Repeat what was said for verification. Make sure you understand what they said clearly. It may take longer to communicate, like I just was mentioning. Be sensitive and do not interrupt or finish the person's sentence. This is something that happens a lot with people who have a stutter. A lot of times people will try to finish their sentences for them, and that is completely inappropriate and very disrespectful. If you still do not understand, ask them to write it down. Pen and paper is your friend. Give your full attention. In the court system, there are a lot is usually going on all at once. Don't try to read documents or fill out paperwork while you're talking with someone with a disability. It's not going to work. It's going to make things much more difficult than if you give your full attention. And then take time, relax, and listen. Make sure you're doing your best to really listen to what they're saying so that you understand and might find some cues. Some people with autism or other intellectual disabilities might act like they're understanding, but don't actually understand what's happening. Then here are some communication tips with people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Always face the person and use eye contact. It's really key. Never cover your mouth when speaking, and don't chew gum. It distracts them and makes it so they can't read your lips very easily. Use body language and facial expressions. American Sign Language is a very expressive language, and people who are deaf use expressions and body language a lot when communicating, and so they appreciate it when we use body language and facial expressions when communicating with them. Slow the pace of speaking, but do not over enunciate or speak loudly. Avoid standing in front of a light source because you'll be backlit and your face will be in shadow and they won't be able to read your lips. Repeat and then rephrase if necessary. Use a pad and pencil when needed, and then minimize background noise as much as possible. And also, this is critical for the court system. I'm sure you all already know this, and you have coordinators in your courts that do this, but make sure you have a contact source to a sign language interpreter, especially for complicated instructions. If you think that this person doesn't fully understand you when you're talking about their legal peril, then it's absolutely urgent that you get an ASL interpreter. You can't have a conversation even with pen and pencil in this situation. You have to have an ASL interpreter if there is something critical being discussed. Now, I have a question. How much do you think a person who reads lips actually understands? What percentage of the conversation do you think they can understand when they're reading your lips? And this is an average person, an average deaf person.
Somebody, let's see, we have a few. Jeminie, we have 30%. 25%, 50%?
Well, thanks. It's around 20% is what I've been told. It's around 20% for someone who's not proficient but does read lips kind of broadly. But for instance, my supervisor is deaf, and she is a proficient lip reader, and we can have full conversations, and she understands basically everything that's said. People who are proficient lip readers will often use context to interpret what's being said. If they don't fully, if they can't fully read your lips, they will use context to understand what's going on. So it's important to communicate very clearly, and again, don't over enunciate, because that alters the shape of your mouth when you're talking. And then here is an interesting little tidbit. Many words on the lips look the same, and they are hard to distinguish when lip reading. So here are some examples. 15 and 50, salad and talent, show me and stupid, elephant shoes, and I love you. I like that one. I like that one a lot. Here are some interesting ways to get into the attention of a person who's deaf or hard of hearing. You can tap them on the shoulder. You can wave your hand in their field of view. You might even stomp or pound your hand on the table if you know the person well. I think it might be a little rude if you don't know the person very well. You can shine a light or flick the lights in the room to get their attention. You can even stomp the floor if you think that would be effective. But definitely, whatever you do, I don't recommend throwing snowballs, but I also want to ensure that you really don't ever have the urge to shout or speak loudly, because again, that's generally not going to work at all. So finally, we really want to always remember that people with disabilities, like all people, are experts on themselves. They know what they like, what they do not like, and what they can and cannot do. Sensitivity and proper etiquette towards people with disabilities is always based on the belief, or must always be based on the belief, that full inclusion in all aspects of American life will help ensure that people with disabilities are given the basic guarantees of independence, freedom of choice, control over their lives, and the opportunity to blend fully and equally into the American mainstream. That part right there reminds me of what Stella said. She wants to make it's so, or she wants to live in a world where that boy in Melbourne, 11th grade, expects to have a wheelchair user as a teacher, instead of being surprised by that. And then here's the key takeaway. We're all capable, you and me and everybody is capable of countering the marginalization and isolation that is created by ableism. We must adopt current chosen disability language and make conscious efforts toward positive, respectful interactions. When we do that, we mark our society's progress, and we shape its future of greater inclusion, opportunity, and equity for people with disabilities. We are part of the solution for people with disabilities. And now I have one more short video that I want to show you. This is where we're going to apply the learning that we've gone through so far today. And this is one of my other favorite videos about disability.
Good morning, Bob.
Morning there, big man. Morning, Alice!
There's no need to be awkward.
Poor Bob. Like so many of us, he just doesn't know how to interact with people with disabilities.
It's pretty easy, really. People with disabilities are people first.
We need the same things that every person needs, like respect.
Good morning, everyone.
Attention!
Okay. Maybe we need to be more specific.
The easiest way to show respect is to focus on the person, not the disability. It's okay. You'll get the hang of it.
One easy way to focus on the person is to watch the person signing and not their interpreter.
Or their companion.
It's really cool that you'd like to help, but do us both a favor and please ask me first. What you think might be helping? I got you. Wait, ah! Oh no, might actually not. If you'd like to offer me help, let me hold on to your elbow. Don't take mine.
Hey, would you like to take my arm?
Sure.
Assistive devices help us to live our lives. They're really important and really personal.
Grabbing them only makes it weird for everyone.
What?
Please only touch our devices and service animals if we've given you permission. And don't take it personally if I ask you not to. Remember that my service animal helps me all the time. Neither of us would like it if we were separated.
Remember, we make our own decisions. We sign documents, vote, volunteer, work, and pay taxes.
We get married.
So don't address me just because I have a great smile.
Just because I'm blind does not mean I'm deaf.
Just because I'm deaf doesn't mean I'm blind.
And just because I use a wheelchair doesn't mean that I can't sweep you off your feet.
So take a deep breath, relax. We don't bite.
Unless we're really hungry.
Hello there, ladies. How are you?
Hello. And if you're not sure what to do, just ask.
Hi, would you still like to see a menu?
No thanks, but can you please read it to me?
Sure, definitely.
Just treat us the way you would want to be treated, and we'll all be okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Alice.
Morning.
Awkward no more. Nice job, Bob. Go forth and be human.
There's no need to be awkward.
Okay, there we go. That's basically it. That's what I wanted to share with you today. Excuse me. We have a list, or I have a list of some nice resources here. This particular page has disability awareness and etiquette resources. That video we just watched, the disability sensitivity training video, is right here if you're interested in sharing it with someone else. And then the Stella Young video is right here. Sorry, I've got a tickle in my throat. Here's a list of other resources about that are related to a variety of different types of disabilities. Here are some resources from the Department of Justice. Here is the U.S. Access Board. This organization is a federal agency that that does technical assistance on physical access. Sorry, boy, I'm having trouble here. And then here are some resources about courts and disability. Really good stuff for you to take a look at if you haven't seen it before. And then that's that.
Well, great. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Jeminie.
Yeah, are there any questions? Sorry, I had to mute myself because I keep coughing. Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you for such a great presentation. Let me see. Does anybody have any questions for Jeminie? Nicole would like to know if you can make the slide deck available.
Sure, I actually will have to go in and make some edits to make it fully accessible, so I can probably do that by tomorrow.
Okay. Nicole, if you want to email me, I'll be happy to send it to you as soon as Jeminie makes it available to us. You can email us at ada@nmcourts.gov. Let me put it right here on the chat. And we'd be happy to send it to you. Alma says, thank you. Great presentation and great information too.
Super. Well, my information, my contact information is on the first slide, and Peggy, of course, has my contact information if you didn't catch that. So if you have any questions about anything related to ADA disability stuff, you can always contact me. Peggy, of course, for court-related stuff is your first stop, I think, or your specific court ADA coordinator, but I'm also available to answer certain questions if you're interested in communicating with me. That's totally fine.
Rhonda says great presentation. And thank you, Jeminie. Rachel says thank you. Yulani says mahalo for your presentation. Yulani is joining us from Hawaii.
I remember.
And Vanessa says thank you as well. Let me see. If you have a question, feel free to, we do have a question, Jeminie, from Lawrence. She says, what is your recommendation if someone with disability becomes rude and hostile when we are attempting to assist them to the best of our abilities, and it appears that we're only agitating them more?
That's a really good question. It's a case-by-case situation. You're going to have to read the person, maybe offer to take a break. I know that some people with service animals can get pretty agitated if they're being turned away or someone's asking them inappropriate questions, because they know what is allowed and with service animals under the law. So not all of them by any means, but I've talked to a few people. I do a lot of service animal advocacy for callers, and I've had a few callers who really get agitated if somebody asks them the wrong questions or demands to see their paperwork or something like that, which doesn't exist actually. So that's one example that I can think of. But you might be talking with someone with an intellectual disability or autism, and they don't understand and they might get agitated. That's a big one. I would assume, first off, well, don't assume, but find out if the problem is related to misunderstanding or not understanding what's being communicated. I think a lot of times communication is the key to resolving conflicts like that. So I don't have a great answer for you, but I'd say maybe taking a break, recommend taking a break for a few minutes and then come back together. That's one way to calm things down a little bit. If the person has a family member or something, you might talk to that person about how to help resolve things, because a lot of times those people know best how to communicate and calm their family member. So that might be another idea.
Thank you, Jeminie. We have another question. Rachel would like to know, what do we do if someone wants to bring their emotional support animal into our office?
Well, you have to identify whether it's a service animal or an emotional support animal. If they say it's an emotional support animal, then you don't have to allow it in. It's not covered under the ADA. Emotional support animals are really only covered in very specific situations under the Fair Housing Act. So they're covered in housing and rental situations, but not in the general public under the ADA. So you would first have to identify whether it was a service animal or not. So you would ask, is the animal required due to a disability? And then if they say yes, then you would ask, what work or task is the animal trained to perform for you? And then if they answer with an active task, such as they alert me to low blood sugar or something along those lines, then you have to assume that it's a service animal unless it starts behaving badly. And at that point, if they answer the questions appropriately, then you just have to let the animal in, and then you can act from there based on the animal's behavior. If they identify the animal as an emotional support animal, though, they say it's an emotional support animal, then no, you don't have to allow the animal into your offices.
These are all great questions. We also like to remind support employees that we have support animal, service animal bench cards that we can distribute to all of our court partners and court employees so that you can have access to all that information. Let's see, we have some great questions for you, Jeminie. Here's another one. Is it appropriate to ask what, if any, type of accommodation is being requested when someone notifies the court that they have a disability, or do we wait for specific requests?
If somebody tells you that they have a disability, that's basically your cue that they don't have to use specific language to request an accommodation. If they tell you they have a disability, it's a good idea right then to just open up the conversation and say, do you have a need for any accommodations related to your disability? And if they say no, then you're done. But if they say yes, then that opens the conversation to determine what's being requested and if and how you're going to allow or provide that accommodation.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself as well if you'd like to ask me a question. I don't see any other questions coming in, Jeminie.
Okay.
Again, thank you so much for your time and for this wonderful presentation. As soon as you send me the PowerPoint, I'll be happy to share it with those of you who have asked for a copy. I would also like to thank our wonderful ASL interpreter, Megan, today for your great service. We appreciate it. And thank everyone for joining us today. Please be sure to let us know if you have any questions or need anything or any resources. And again, thank you and have a great rest of your week, everyone. Thank you, Jeminie.
Great. Thanks, Peggy. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Annie.